Hi, everyone. It's me, Krylios, Team Racing Productions MC and producer. And welcome to our YouTube channel today. Kristen Jeffers, welcome.
Hi,
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to be here and great to see everybody who's streaming live or might be watching this a little bit later.
Awesome, awesome. Well, it is my pleasure to have you here. Let's kick this off with having you talk a little bit about yourself. So please introduce yourself to our audience and let them know a little bit about you.
So, everybody, I'm Kristen Jeffers. My pronouns are she and they. I am a Black queer feminist urbanist. And so, what that means is the work that I do, everything that I've been kind of shaping my life around is focused on that. So, on paper, kind of in a traditional sense, I'm an author, I'm an urban planner, I'm a data analyst, I'm a researcher. This is coming up on year 6 that I've been in the DMV, but I'm originally from North Carolina, and that's kind of the root of where I started doing all this work. And I've lived all over, and I've spoken all over, and I've done work all over. But I'm really, really passionate about creating Black queer feminist spaces. And of course, that's where the urbanism come from. That's kind of what we would call it, kind of in the urban planning space, urbanism.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And that is so interesting to hear about, especially when it comes to urban planning and, being very intentional, being very specific, being, very getting that all together like that to me is very, very cool. So talk to me a little bit about this and talk to me about how your hometown has really, influenced the work that you currently do. That to me, I'd really love to know more about. So let me in on that.
So, what you're seeing on the screen, folks, is when I was featured on Triad City Beat, which is one of my hometown alt weeklies. So, many of you are aware of the Greensboro Four. Some of you have probably been over to the Smithsonian, sat in the seat. Some of you have had the opportunity to actually go to the International Civil Rights Museum, which is pictured here, and that's me on the far right there of the on the picture. And so I grew up with my parents, both Black Americans, grew up kind of in rural-ish North Carolina, kind of surrounding Greensboro, and they just really
Mhm.
instilled in me this like need to know who I came from, stories, like old stories, like who our people were, and then just I always just started, especially my dad, asking questions like, so. We had a store here today. Why isn't it here now? Like we
Mhm.
had some shifts in like our economy, and all those things were just fascinating. So, but really at the core, it was like, so why is the world different for some
Mhm.
people than it is for other people? And of course, it seems childlike. And of course, now as an adult, I'm knee deep in it. That's why the name and the way I do my work is literally Black and queer and feminist
Mhm.
and urbanism. And then there's like I do with classes, I'm looking at like ability and able all these different challenges, all these different things that come together. So, but it was rooted in just my ancestors and my elders. Simple as
Yes.
that.
So when one looks at urban planning and one has to take, these different intersections, into mind and perspective, how does that influence or change the way how we see where we live and how we thrive in how we live and how we move about the spaces, in where we live when one takes a real, intersectionalist look at that. Tell me what you've seen in your research and your work about that.
So for a lot of us, we come up upon this when we need to say we're here in like DC and we need to take the bus and figure
Mhm.
all these challenges with metro, and then of course the rents, and then of course for some folks it's meant okay, gentrification, displacement. Hey, I wanted, some of us grew up dreaming about buying one of those nice little row houses, seeing them, hearing this concept of chocolate city and saying, oh wow, well, as a Black person, then of course those of us in this queer community, this has been one of the handful of places being Black and queer, and honestly being queer period is celebrated, and it's the infrastructure is there. But it's because certain people started laws, certain people are
Mhm.
allowed to build here. Many of you have heard of the concept of redlining that kind of underpins where we are today, because that's how some neighborhoods became Black and some neighborhoods became white, and some neighborhoods were other people of the global majority, but still not white folks. The different cities have different ways of categorizing that. Different places have different like laws, even on how our existence is. We're watching like on pins and needles to see if certain areas will still allow abortions, or if they go after like marriage equality. Like, where in my home state, if marriage equality is reversed, it's now constitutionally protected that marriage is between a man and a woman. So already I'm not necessarily gonna want to go back home, even though I love everybody back home. I've had a supportive community, but if the laws change, and it's laws like that, the Supreme Court, but then sometimes it's zoning ordinances that say, okay, only certain amount of homes can be built on a property. We can't build an apartment here, or in some cases, like we've seen it specifically in like Montgomery County, people don't necessarily want certain homes built next to them. There's something called parking minimums, where you have to have a minimum of parking spaces. Even if you're in like downtown DC and you're going to walk there from Metro, in some places and some properties, they actually have to provide you a parking space, even if you're coming in a different way, or you're right on the bus stop, or like Lyft or Uber. There's like even, and this isn't just having like a drop off, this is like you got to park your car. And so that factors into, and then of course here in DC, the height limits, you can't build but so high. So a lot of people use that as an opportunity to say X amount of people can't live here, certain people can't live here. And then we've seen this even with our queer spaces, like, there's been so many changes in the nightlife spaces. And honestly, there's been changes in community centers. And, if this is one of the safest places in the United States to live, but you can't afford to live here, or you have to work a certain job and then potentially recloset yourself, that's where all this comes into urban planning. Like, I spend a lot of my time helping urban planners figure out what that looks like for them. But also, as you'll probably see in a couple slides here, I want to help us understand what this means for us, that we don't have to be discouraged. Gentrification doesn't have to be a death sentence for us, especially some of us who are younger and already kind of in the scene. If you're transplants here, you probably were brought here to live the life and do the thing. It doesn't have to be the end. But then for our elders who have been here, lived through things, lots of things, not just HIV, but other different geopolitical things, I want to be there for them too.
Certainly. And you brought up something so important, and that's, the loss of queer spaces. And this is something that's happening in, many cities, many areas all across the US. And with the pandemic, a lot of that was exacerbated by a lot. So with this loss of queer space, talk to me a little bit about that, and if we're seeing and what we're seeing on the horizon when it comes to new queer spaces, or the reintroduction of queer spaces that we lost, or even, a change in how we have queer spaces and the type of queer spaces we have. Give me some insights on that.
I know for a lot of folks, especially more of our wider and cis maler members of the community, integration into society, assimilation into society has pretty much happened. Everybody's like, well, we have Pride every year. We have all these corporate sponsors. I've been working at this place. I bring my partner, but that looks different. And that's when those intersections come in. When you have another intersection of being more femme of center, if you're Black, like colorism, like the different Black spectrums, like even textures and what hair textures, like for a lot of people, like, changing how you present yourself. Like you might be femme today and you might be masc tomorrow, or you might be just who you are, andro. And there are a lot of folks who, and historically we've battled through having people's bodies show up in a particular space, even things from like fat phobia or disability, having these spaces that don't have ramps. We don't work with captioning or ASL, or just the different things that we can do to make things safer and open for everybody. And the other thing was, so much of queer life was under the ground, happening at night, and that but we live all day long,
Yeah.
24/7. So I'm excited to see places like As I Am, that they're talking about having different times of the day. I'm excited, of course, about what happened with Black in Space and what Maker's
Mhm.
Lab, what Lee has done to try to bring these activities. And then shout out to anybody who's hosting the gallery openings, the community centers, all of our shelters, and places that are refuge for folks to come in. But I will say this, I definitely supported the actions last summer around Nellie's, because it's it's horrible. Like, say you're a Black feminine presenting person, you're just trying to kick back,
Mm.
and the place says, like, you're in a bar, so you're kicking back and but that's just not what we do there. And I want to challenge, I know it's hard, and this is where urban planning comes in, being able to secure physical spaces, having ownership. And we talk about this in the general Black community, Black ownership of spaces. And unfortunately, if you look at DC's history, you might be surprised to see that there wasn't as much Black ownership. Like, the story was there, the myth is there, but and if there was Black ownership, there wasn't necessarily like a Black liberation lens on it. There wasn't like we need to secure assets for us so that we can thrive and we don't all have to, like, bust our asses to get where we need to go. And so that aspect, I think, I'm happy to see more sober spaces. I'm happy to see all kinds of spaces. I'm happy to see youth spaces, not just organizations like Smile, Safe Spaces, NOMA, but just in general, places and that help our, like you see here on the screen, like my work, I want to see us thrive. I want to
Mhm.
see us liberated. I want to see us doing things, having something to do when it's normal, like, and not just, okay, bottomless brunch, expensive, but if you're here because it's safe, like bodily safe, there's parks, and then there's also this sense of ownership, like there's
Mm.
things to pass down,
Yes.
there's
Yes.
assets, so we're not battling people who don't want to see the entire community thrive. But that doesn't absolve the entire community, that doesn't absolve you from your internalized phobias of different presentations and gender
Mhm.
identities and sexual identities within our community, within our umbrella. You don't just get to
True.
blindly get over that and make your
Yeah.
space unrestricted. But
Mhm.
there's also a need for that sort of home-like space. Traditionally we've had it in ballroom, traditionally we've had it in like just regular houses, but the kind of thing where, say you're just coming out, whatever age you are, you're just learning about all the intricacies of queer life. Maybe you don't have friends that are, or family members that are, and you're just figuring it out. You know, Whereas some people have these community centers and there are these events. Where do we go as queer people specifically? Where do we go when we've got other intersections going on that fulfills
Certainly.
us? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I like one of the things that you stress, I realized a lot and talk about is one, the importance of our elders in the
Mhm,
community, because
mhm,
they do so much. They pass down
mhm,
the history. They're the gatekeepers a lot
mhm,
of that. They know what's happened, so they're
mhm,
able to know what will happen.
mhm,
And many times they're overlooked, many times
mhm,
they're forgotten about.
mhm,
And that is really, really sad many times that we don't uplift our elders like they're supposed to do, especially those in the community that, as you said, have gone through a lot
mhm,
within the community and serve as this point of reference, serve as great leadership,
mhm.
into bringing us, Black people, queer people, wherever, into the future as we're supposed to go. Talk to me a little bit more about the importance of elders and the impact that they have on our communities and our spaces.
Like, for one thing, thinking about that, there's so many elders that they said weren't supposed to be here. Like,
Mhm.
there were so many elders that age was supposed to wipe them off. And of course, now we're seeing these moments with COVID where people are like, oh, well, they're still here. We can't believe they're still here. And of course, that's tragic. That's People think that certain people are disposable, but
Mhm.
they're here. And then, of course, the other thing people say all the time, well, there's you're only like gay or queer when you're in a certain age bracket. You're not gay when you're little, and that's just polluting the kids. And then when you're old, you just shrivel up and you don't. And of course, there are unfortunately, still a lot of nursing homes. Getting back to like laws and regulations, a lot of nursing homes are allowed to discriminate against same-gendered, queer partnerships, whatever state that they're in. Some of them are required to be legally married. Some of them are required to like present a certain way. Like there's all different levels of that. And sometimes you can't, even if you need care, like you can't go to a particular long-term care facility because they don't like you. Never mind you have a partner, but you. And that is leaving a lot of, like, I don't believe in anybody being left behind like that. That's just the vulnerabilities there. We've come so far, and we have so much technology, and we there is wealth in this world. It's just where we put this wealth in this world to make sure that folks are there. And so I want to shout out organizations like Sage, like that beautiful exhibition that they just did. Of course, Pat and Paulette Martin, who dear friends of mine, and Alessa's, that we love their wisdom and their energy. And the other thing with intra age community, don't automatically assume that our older elders don't understand the nuances. They had, many of them had to pass, or it wasn't happening. Like many of them did not allow themselves, and they weren't allowed to be who they are. So that's why you got, elders, like people that thought their grandparents are straight and they're coming out, or then you have older, like Black queer people. And of course the word queer, and respecting that for a lot of that generation, that's not a word.
I know.
I
just had an
and anybody watching, know that I love you, and I will happily not use that word in your presence. But for me, I'm standing on your shoulders where I get to be my full self, which means quirky, which means odd. It means that's that liberation pushing through. But for you, I honor the struggle. I thank you. I love you. I'm happy that you're still here with us, and know that there are young people out here with our fullness, us being all over the place and us just being exuberant and adored in our exuberance. That's what it's here for. We talk about this Black civil rights movement and all the things that we're pushing forward to, this time of Black Lives Matter, and putting more of an underline on that it's all Black lives, not just the nice and respectable ones. And I love to see that happen in the LGBTQ community, and of course, everything else, every letter for me matters, and every age range matters. And of course, there's so much to unpack here, but that's why having this space, having this open conversation, and then bringing in all the different sociology and theory around oppression, imperialism, capitalism, and how those things shaped why we don't have our gender expressions, why we don't always have our sexual orientations, why sometimes we don't even have our cultural, like our racial, national, cultural identities.
Yeah. And I know you spend a lot of time, on stages, getting to talk to people, getting to really get into this with other, thought leaders, and being able to share among, others about these conversations, to have these conversations, to go deeper, to do more research, and to really understand the different perspectives, how they affect, individuals uniquely, and how they intersect with others. And that must be an amazing thing to be able to do, and to be able to hear these different perspectives, and to be able to share your own. Talk to me about what that response has been like for you, and being able to do this.
I remember it's been about just over a decade since the first time I've been on the stage formally. What you're seeing on screen was the first time I did this internationally, meaning, of course, just over the border in Vancouver. And there's a smidge of a possibility I'm going to get to do that again soon, but just being able to do that. I do miss being in person. I'm not that person that's rushing out here right now. Specifically not without like testing, ventilation, masking. Like I'm very adamant about that, because there's so many, even pre-pandemic, there were so many, what I've become aware of is that in these rooms, as you see, and even with this picture, unfortunately, someone else was cropped out, but I'm the darkest person on stage. I'm
Mhm.
the I can't speak to anybody else's gender and sexual identity. I think that might have been represented on this stage, which is more often than
Mhm.
not that part is racial identity, class, all those things don't always get to be represented in the same way. And so it's an honor to be able to be on global stages. It's an honor to be able to
Yes.
keynote all
Mhm.
these things. My hope is that the kinds of folks that respond to that kind of conversation want to sit down with me and have a conversation about, okay, this is how we need to do it.
Mhm.
Versus, like, of course, the conversations I have normally, like, we're having this casual interview. I have the interviews and conversations with family members, friends, kind of casual things. But some folks need to see you were I was in X publication or on X
Yes.
stage or
Yes.
anything like that. But it doesn't matter. We're all facing this. We're all facing a return, quote unquote, to or an attempted return to where we were. We're
Mhm.
also facing that in some parts of the world, things may never be the same. And for some
Mhm.
of us, we are grieving friends, elders, we're grieving the lives that we had. And so getting to the thought leaders and being a thought leader is an honor because we need to have this conversation. We need to be taking action at all stages and in all places.
Certainly, certainly. Well, for anybody who wants to, find out more about you, find out more about what you do, get updates, follow you, and, just keep up with everything that's going on with Kristen Jeffers, how can they go ahead and do that?
So the blackurbanist.com is a good place to start.
Mhm.
And then over there, I have a weekly newsletter, comes out on Mondays. Up on the screen, hopefully the code works, but if not, just go to the blackurbanist.com and there's a subscribe link to the newsletter. I'm at Black Urbanist on Instagram and Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. Just look up Kristen Jeffers, and it's the person in the blue dress that looks the most like me on all these pictures. Yeah. And then you can send me an email, theblackurbanist@gmail.com. You feel free to send me anything, send me any requests. And then, of course, I'm on Patreon, Kristen E. Jeffers. That's me. For this work. I also, if you go to my website, specifically if you go to the blackurbanist.com/Twitter, I have a landing page where you can subscribe to the newsletter at any of your favorite newsletter platforms. And on several newsletter platforms. And then I have Cash App, Venmo, all of those things. Just search by name, Kristen Jeffers. I'm pretty consistent in them. One of the few Black Kristen Jefferses is prominent in the world. So if you're looking for me and you want to give me some support or subscribe to my work or keep up with me, I'm pretty easy to find on the socials and
Awesome.
such.
And we're going to have those links in the description below. So you can go ahead and check out everything that Kristen has to offer. Description is in the link. The link will be in the description
Yes.
below. Kristen, it is so good getting to
Yes.
talk with you today, getting to have a little kiki. And thank you
Yes.
for the work that you do in our community. Thank you
Mhm.
for the conversations that
Mhm.
you have. And, just thank you for helping us really lean into every aspect of our intersectionality that makes us who we are and just really pushing us forward as a society. So thank you.
Well, thank you all. This is a legendary crew, a legend, truly legendary in all
Yes.
senses and forms. Don't think I don't recognize that. And of course, Les and I are very appreciative of all of y'all's support. And thank you for talking to me today. And you'll see one of us pop up here, there, or somewhere over the next
There
few
we
weeks.
go.
So
I love it. Well, I look forward to doing this again. Thank
yes.
you so much for being here. Everyone who's watching, remember the link will be in the description. Follow Kristen, get your Kristen judge right now. And while you're at it, please follow Team Racine Productions at Team Racine on all forms of social media. Like, comment, and subscribe. But most of all, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.